The role of the board. The board of directors is responsible for aligning interest by balancing the conflicting and equally valid perspective of shareholders and management on issues such as capital structure, control, executive, remuneration, risk management, and shareholder rights. To further understand the details related to the role of the board, organizations should look to both local legislation and international guidelines and best practice. For organizations in Trinidad and Tobago, the primary piece of local legislation applicable to their role is the Companies Act 1995. With respect to international best guidelines, two of the most utilized references include the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD's Corporate Governance Principles 2004, Principle 6D, and the European Confederation of Directors Associations, Principle 2. All directors have three principal legal duties, which are often referred to interchangeably as fiduciary obligations. They are to direct the management of the business and affairs of the company. This is from Section 60B of the Companies Act, Chapter 8101. To act honestly and in good faith with a view to the best interests of the company. This is from Section 99(1)(a) of the Companies Act, Chapter 8101. And to exercise the care, diligence, and skill of a reasonably prudent person. This is from Section 99(1)(b) of the Companies Act, Chapter 8101. Boards have a duty of care to its shareholders. This duty of care is an obligation imposed on the board that they act on and take decisions on a fully informed basis and with due diligence. A director's duty of loyalty means that directors act exclusively in the interest of the company, which includes the interest of its employees as well as its shareholders, and do not allow their personal or any other singular interests to prevail. In order to discharge its duty of care, the board needs to ensure that it has all the relevant information about the company. In order to make fully informed decisions, directors must have access to high-quality, unbiased information, including independent professional advice paid for by the company. It is good practice for the board to specify the information that they would like to have presented by management, instead of just letting the CEO decide what is shared with the board. Required information usually relates to answering these questions. 1. Are the results that the board directed management to achieve for the owners being achieved? 2. To what extent is the management strategy working? 3. What are the risks that can endanger achievement of results? And 4. To what extent are the operations compliant with regulations set by the board? Directors of organizations registered as companies in Trinidad and Tobago have duties to ensure that the organization is compliant with all laws of Trinidad and Tobago. International guidelines also provide guidance regarding the key functions the board should fulfill. Two primary documents used when referencing international best practice guidelines include Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, Corporate Governance Principles 2004, Principle 6D, and the European Confederation of Directors Associations, the ECODA, Principle 2. The OECD principles indicate that boards have a function with respect to 1. Reviewing and guiding corporate strategy, major plans of action, risk policy, annual budgets and business plans, setting performance objectives, monitoring implementation and corporate performance, and overseeing major capital expenditures, acquisitions, and divestitures. 2. Monitoring the effectiveness of the company's governance practices and making changes as needed. 3. Selecting, compensating, monitoring, and, when necessary, replacing key executives and overseeing succession planning. 4. Aligning key executive and board remuneration with the longer-term interests of the company and its shareholders. 5. Ensuring a formal and transparent board nomination and election process. 6. Monitoring and managing potential conflicts of interests of management, board members and shareholders, including misuse of corporate assets and abuse in related party transactions. 7. Ensuring the integrity of the corporation's accounting and financial reporting systems, including the independent audit, and that appropriate systems of control are in place, in particular, systems for risk management, financial and operational control, and compliance with the law and relevant standards. 8. Overseeing the process of disclosure and communications. ECODA Principle 2 highlights that 1. The board's role is to provide leadership of the company. 2. As an intermediate step on the road to an effective main board, small, unlisted companies may consider the establishment of an additional advisory board without formal decision-making responsibilities. 3. All directors must take decisions objectively in the interest of the company. As the company develops, inviting an independent director onto the board can help in focusing the board on the corporate interest. 4. The board should elect a chairman. The chairman is responsible for leadership of the board, ensuring its effectiveness on all aspects of its role and setting its agenda. 5. The board should appoint a chief executive or managing director to lead the management team and exercise executive authority over the operation of the company. 6. The board should set the company's strategic objectives and ensure that the necessary financial and human resources are in place for the company to meet its objectives. 7. The board is responsible for monitoring and evaluating management performance. 8. The board should set the company's values and standards and ensure that its obligations to its shareholders and other stakeholders are understood and met. The board should be involved in the strategic development process, as a minimum, approve the strategy and ensure that it lies within the framework of shareholders' expectations. 9. It is the responsibility of the board to ensure that the company complies with its Articles of Association as well as relevant legal, regulatory and governance requirements. 10. There should be a formal schedule of matters which states which matters are specifically reserved for the board's decision and which are to be delegated to management. And 11. Where directors have concerns which cannot be resolved about the running of the company or a proposed action, they should ensure that their concerns are recorded in the board minutes. Boards of directors are responsible for the governance of the companies. The shareholders' role in governance is to appoint directors and the auditors and to satisfy themselves that an appropriate governance structure is in place. The responsibilities for the board include setting the company's strategic aims, providing the leadership to put them into effect, supervising the management of the business, and reporting to shareholders on their stewardship. The core functions of the board are to communicate with the owners, to guide executives, and to monitor the performance of the company. The board adds value by determining what results are to be achieved, testing the assumptions and strategies that management develops for achieving these results, monitoring and reporting to owners, and communicating with other major stakeholders while offering its advice to the executive on high-level strategic issues. In best practice boards, the board and management have distinct roles which are clearly defined and formally communicated through a board charter. Boards have a variety of responsibilities related to the monitoring, guiding and directing of management and the enterprise. Some of the key responsibilities of the board are to review and guide corporate strategy as proposed by management, review and guide major plans of action, including annual budgets and/or business plans, agree and set performance objectives with management and monitor management's implementation of plans, evaluate, select and dismiss the CEO, oversee the setting of remuneration practices and approve remuneration plans, oversee major capital expenditures, monitor the effectiveness of the company's governance practices. A board charter's purpose is to improve and systemize the board's role and powers, enhance the transparency of its governance, and demonstrate the company's commitment to good corporate governance practices. In order for boards to effectively take up their roles and fulfill their responsibilities as directors, a structured framework for the implementation of critical corporate governance principles is required. It is therefore important that the appropriate policies are in place to ensure that systems of governance are effectively implemented, monitored, and periodically reviewed. Thus, the board should develop a board charter, which forms the foundation for a robust culture of stewardship. The board charter contains guidelines to align the board's key structures and processes so as to achieve good corporate governance. A detailed board charter should outline 1. Duties and powers of the board, including general duties and powers, duties regarding the supervisor of management, duties regarding the members and performance of the board, agrees and sets performance objectives with management supervision of financial reporting, duties regarding nominations and assessment of external auditor, compensation of management board members, and relations with stakeholders. 2. Decision-making within the board. The board charter should also include the decision-making process for members, for example, the voting process, adoption at meetings, and documentation procedure. A schedule of matters is a statement of reserved powers arising out of their board charter. A formal schedule of matters defines the board's decision-making powers and those delegated to management. Management must understand that it answers to the board and that the board is there to give expertise and value-adding input. These statements are regarded as evidence of good practice in corporate governance. A typical schedule should contain regulatory and legal requirements, auditor issues, communications to shareholders and the media, dividend payments, accounting and management control policies and practices, director and senior management appointments, removals, terms, conditions, training, etc., disclosure items, strategic oversight, disposal or acquisition of major assets, major contracts and investments, authority levels, treasury, risk management, capital policies, budgets, strategies, mission, vision, transactions above a certain materiality, guarantees, indemnities, securities, subsidiaries, associates, joint ventures, and share capital and financing. As a sample, we have included a template of a typical board charter for reference. Board charters typically include purpose, board profile, size, expertise, and independence, appointment, term of office, resignation, executive, non-executive chairman and deputy chairman, company secretary, committees, duties and powers, duties regarding the supervision of management, duties regarding the members and the performance of the board, duties regarding nomination and assessment of external auditor, compensation of executives and board members, relations with stakeholders, board meetings and decision-making, frequency, notice, agenda and venue of meetings, attendance of and admittance to meetings, chairman of the meetings, reports, decision-making within the board. Other provisions include conflicts of interest of board members, compensation of board members, induction program, ongoing training and education. Other positions, confidentiality, miscellaneous. Appendix 1, meaning of connected party and connected party group as identified in Insurance Bill 2011 Section 4, and finally Appendix 2, policy regarding independent external auditor. The chairman and CEO are required to work closely together in order to effectively achieve the targets of the company. Nevertheless, best practice strongly recommends that the chairman of the board and the CEO of the company should not be the same person. The roles of the chairman and the CEO are separated in order to create a clear distinction between the oversight role of the chair and the executive role of management. The chairman's main responsibility is to ensure that the board is effective in linking with the owners, setting the company's direction and conditions for achieving the desired results, as well as monitoring the performance of the company. The CEO's key role is to assume the lead in putting the long-term strategy into operation so as to achieve the results within the conditions specified by the board. Sometimes this separation of roles is not possible or practical in small, closely held companies, and the board should take measures to enhance the balance of power. Strategies could include having a lead independent director to balance the powers of the chair, having committees that do not involve the chairman or the CEO, a strong presence of other independent or non-executive directors, or selecting board members with the required skills and experience who can challenge when necessary. The chairman provides overall leadership to the board, ensures effective performance of the board and of each of its members, is responsible for setting the board agenda and the board's annual work plan, sets goals and programs for the board to carry out its functions on behalf of shareholders or owners, coordinates and supervises the activities of the directors, directs the evaluation process for the board, directors and executive management, and serves as an informal link between the board, the CEO and management. The Chief Executive Officer works closely with the board chairman, formulates strategy, business plan and budgets for board approval, is responsible for financial corporate objectives, formulates major corporate policies, supervises management, ensures effective management succession planning, ensures continuous improvement in services and products, manages relations with investors, major customers, business partners, and ensures the company's long-term sustainability.